You sit down, plate in front of you, and your hand moves before your brain even decides anything at all. A piece of bread, a scoop of rice, a bite of pasta, it feels automatic, harmless, and completely meaningless in that instant. But inside your body, that very first bite is never neutral. It is already a decision being made in silence. Before a single calorie is counted, before food even touches your bloodstream, your physiology has already chosen a direction. Is this meal going to be stored away as fat, or is it going to be used as fuel? Most people believe fat gain comes from how much they eat, how clean the food is, or how disciplined they feel. But the real answer is quieter than that, and far more precise than any calorie count could ever be. The order in which you eat sends instructions to your hormones long before digestion has even properly begun. Two people can eat identical meals, same calories, same macros, and still end up with opposite outcomes entirely. One body stays calm, stable, and efficient, while the other spikes hard, crashes fast, and stores everything it can. This is not about willpower at all. This is about signaling, and signaling changes everything downstream immediately. Protein is usually sold as gym food, muscle food, something eaten only to feel full after a workout. But that framing misses the point completely, because protein is not just nutrition. Protein is information your body reads instantly. When protein arrives first, it tells your nervous system something very specific and very reassuring right away. Energy is coming slowly, resources are available, and there is absolutely no emergency happening inside your body. Once that message lands early in a meal, everything that happens afterward changes in ways you cannot see. Blood sugar rises differently, insulin behaves differently, hunger hormones shift, and even fat cells respond in a new way. Most people never hear this because nutrition advice obsesses over totals, restrictions, and rules instead of sequence and timing. What if the biggest lever was never about what you removed, but about what you chose to eat first? What if the very first bite quietly decided whether your body feels safe enough to burn fat or not? Once you understand what protein does when it goes first, you stop fighting your meals entirely and start guiding them. And the effects begin immediately, not weeks later, not once discipline builds, but from the very first bite itself. Before food even becomes glucose, before insulin gets released, before a single calorie technically matters, your body is already responding. The moment you see food, smell it, or taste it, your nervous system starts preparing for what it expects next. This early stage is called the cephalic response, and it quietly decides most of your metabolic outcome for that meal. Your brain constantly asks one question: is this fast energy or slow energy arriving into the body right now? Is this abundance or is this scarcity, something to store quickly or something the body can process calmly instead? When refined carbohydrates or fat hit your system first, the prediction is immediate. Energy is coming in fast and hard. Glucose is about to spike, so insulin must rise sharply just to protect the bloodstream from that sudden flood. The body prepares for overflow before overflow has even technically happened, purely based on what arrived first on your plate. But when protein goes first instead, that entire prediction shifts, and the body responds in a completely different way. Amino acids move through the stomach slowly, triggering stretch receptors and chemical sensors that signal fullness and steady control. The stomach delays emptying, giving your body time to prepare properly instead of reacting in a sudden panic. The small intestine releases incretin hormones like GLP-1 and GIP, telling the pancreas to release insulin in a measured way. This is not about suppressing insulin entirely. This is about timing, tone, and giving your hormones room to breathe. Protein first creates a smooth hormonal curve instead of the harsh spike and painful crash pattern most people experience daily. At the same time, protein activates the gut-brain axis, sending calm signals straight through your vagus nerve. These signals travel to your brainstem, telling your nervous system that digestion is underway and there's no threat. Cortisol, the hormone that raises blood sugar defensively under stress, quietly begins to settle down almost immediately. Ghrelin, the hormone that drives urgency and sudden hunger, starts dropping before carbohydrates have even entered your bloodstream yet. So when carbs finally do arrive later in the meal, they enter a system that is already calm and prepared. Glucose gets cleared more efficiently because insulin sensitivity is naturally higher when your body feels relaxed instead of alarmed. Muscles absorb more of that glucose, especially when they've already been signaled that repair and protein are the priority. Fat cells receive a completely different message too. Instead of locking energy away, they let it move freely through. This is why the exact same bowl of rice can create wildly different blood sugar curves depending on what came first. Your body isn't reacting to individual nutrients alone. It is reacting to patterns, sequences, and expectations built moment by moment. Protein first reshapes those expectations entirely, telling digestion to slow down and the pancreas to respond proportionally instead of urgently. It tells your brain to stand down from emergency mode, and that shift changes how the entire meal unfolds. This is why people often feel calmer and more satisfied when they simply start their meals this specific way. It is not psychological, it is entirely physiological, your body doing what it naturally does best with clear early signals. Once that early calm is established, benefits begin stacking in ways most people never connect back to that first bite. Appetite becomes quieter, not because you're forcing restraint, but because urgency signals never fully activate in the first place. When protein leads the meal, peptide YY increases, GLP-1 stays elevated longer, and leptin sensitivity slowly improves over time. These signals don't scream at your brain, they whisper steady consistency, and your body listens closely to whispers too. You feel satisfied sooner, but more importantly, that satisfaction actually lasts far longer than it normally would otherwise. That late-night craving for something sweet or crunchy often never shows up because blood sugar never crashed to begin with. Energy stays stable for hours, not because you ate less food, but because your body distributed fuel instead of dumping it. This stability directly affects fat metabolism because when insulin rises slowly, fat-burning enzymes are never aggressively shut down. That means fat burning doesn't fully stop just because you ate. Your body stays metabolically flexible and ready to adapt. Over time, this flexibility separates people who eat normally and stay lean from those who feel pushed backward every single meal. Protein first also changes how nutrients get partitioned throughout your body, especially when combined with regular resistance training sessions. Amino acids activate muscle protein synthesis pathways, telling your body that muscle tissue deserves priority over everything else. When muscle becomes the priority, glucose finally has somewhere productive to go instead of being pushed into fat storage. Instead of ending up in visceral fat, glucose gets pulled into muscle cells to replenish glycogen and support repair. There's also a subtle behavioral shift happening quietly. Starting with protein naturally slows down the entire pace of eating. Chewing simply takes longer, giving satiety signals enough time to register before your plate is even close to empty. By the time carbohydrates or fats show up later, the urgency to eat quickly has already completely disappeared. Portions shrink naturally, without any conscious effort at all. No willpower required, no forced restriction of any kind. People assume they need to remove entire foods to get results, but often they simply need to change the order. Even digestion itself becomes noticeably more efficient because protein stimulates stomach acid and enzymes that improve everything that follows after. This can reduce bloating, reflux, and that heavy post-meal fatigue many people blame on food instead of sequencing. Over weeks and months, these small hormonal improvements slowly compound into something much bigger than any single meal. Fewer spikes mean fewer crashes. Fewer crashes mean less cortisol, and less cortisol means less signaling toward visceral fat storage. What started as a simple change at the beginning of a meal becomes a full-body shift in energy handling, not through restriction or punishment, but through alignment with signals your body was already designed to respond to. At the center of all this is a simple truth people ignore. Insulin itself was never actually the enemy here. Insulin is a delivery hormone, and it only becomes a problem when forced to act quickly, constantly, without any context. When carbohydrates lead a meal, insulin gets summoned urgently before your body has time to properly prepare itself. That urgency shuts down fat release completely and slowly teaches fat cells to become defensive against future energy surges. Over time, those cells stop listening entirely, and insulin resistance begins, not as disease, but as protective adaptation instead. Protein first changes that entire conversation, giving insulin actual context before it's even released into your bloodstream. By the time insulin arrives, your body already knows how much energy is coming and exactly how fast to handle it. This lowers peak insulin levels even when total carbohydrate intake stays exactly the same as it always was before. Multiple clinical studies show that protein before carbohydrates reduces post-meal glucose spikes and lowers overall insulin demand significantly. This effect is especially powerful for people already dealing with insulin resistance or early signs of pre-diabetes developing. But the deeper effect goes far beyond simple numbers on a glucose monitor screen sitting on your kitchen counter. Lower insulin peaks preserve insulin sensitivity over time, keeping your cells responsive instead of numb and constantly overwhelmed. This keeps glucose moving into muscle and liver cells instead of being diverted straight into stubborn visceral fat. At the same time, cortisol and insulin stop amplifying each other, breaking a dangerous cycle most people never even notice. High insulin paired with high cortisol is the perfect recipe for central fat storage around your midsection specifically. Protein-first meals blunt that dangerous pairing, letting cortisol drop while satiety hormones rise steadily and predictably instead. The result is a hormonal environment where fat storage stops being the default response your body has to eating. There's also a neurological piece to this that almost nobody ever talks about in typical nutrition conversations online. Stable blood sugar creates stable dopamine, and stable dopamine means fewer cravings pulling at you later in the day. When glucose spikes and crashes repeatedly, dopamine follows that same roller coaster, driving cravings and constant reward-seeking behavior afterward. When meals begin with protein instead, dopamine stays remarkably steady, and that pull towards snacks and sugar simply fades away. This is why people often report better focus, calmer mood, and fewer afternoon slumps without changing their calories at all. Your system is simply operating within the range it was originally designed to function inside all along. Even sleep quietly improves because evening protein-first meals reduce nighttime glucose volatility and lower nocturnal cortisol spikes significantly. This allows melatonin to rise naturally, and growth hormone gets the space it needs to do its repair work. Fat loss doesn't happen because you suddenly tried harder. It happens because your body finally gets uninterrupted time to recover. None of this requires perfection from you. It only requires consistency, shown meal after meal, day after day. Protein first isn't a rule meant to restrict your enjoyment. It's a signal meant to restore natural order instead. Once that order gets restored, your body quietly handles the rest, efficiently and without any real struggle involved. Of course, like any biological lever, this idea can absolutely be misused when it gets misunderstood by people online. Protein first does not mean drowning every single meal in excess protein while ignoring everything else on your plate. Some people swing to extremes, forcing huge protein portions even when appetite is naturally low that particular day. Others pair protein with ultra-processed foods and expect the exact same hormonal effect to somehow show up. But biology doesn't respond to labels on packaging. It responds to actual quality and timing working together properly. Processed protein bars, sweetened shakes, or protein eaten while rushed and stressed don't create the same calming hormonal response. Stress alone can override sequencing completely, no matter how carefully you planned the order of your meal.
If you eat protein first while scrolling, rushing, or emotionally overwhelmed, cortisol can still dominate the entire signal anyway. Another common mistake is using protein first as an excuse to completely ignore fiber and essential micronutrients. Vegetables matter, not because they're low-calorie, but because they slow digestion and reinforce glucose stability throughout the day. Protein first works best when it leads into a fully balanced meal, not when it stands completely alone. There's also the issue of timing across your entire day, because mornings and evenings behave very differently biologically. In the morning, protein first becomes especially powerful, since insulin sensitivity is naturally higher right after you wake up. Cortisol is already elevated in the morning, and protein here stabilizes that curve instead of letting it spike badly. In the evening, protein first still helps significantly, but overeating late at night can quietly blunt those same benefits. This sequence is supportive, not magical, and it cannot override chronic sleep deprivation or constant unmanaged daily stress. Perhaps the most important mistake is expecting instant fat loss as immediate proof that this approach is actually working. Protein first often improves energy, appetite control, and blood sugar stability long before any visible weight changes ever appear. That's not failure at all. That's repair quietly happening first, exactly the way your body was designed to work. Your body prioritizes internal safety before it ever releases stored energy back out into the bloodstream for use. When people quit too early because the scale didn't move, they completely miss the entire point of this approach. Fat loss is never the first adaptation your body makes. Stability always comes first, and fat loss follows naturally after. Treating protein first as a trick instead of a signal leads straight to frustration and eventual abandonment of the method. Treating it instead as a way to communicate safety leads to genuine patience, and patience eventually leads to real results. When you zoom out far enough, protein first stops looking like a rule and starts looking like a conversation.
For years, people were taught to dominate their bodies, override hunger, suppress cravings, and force results through raw control. That the body doesn't respond to force with cooperation, it responds to force with defense, every single time. Visceral fat, insulin resistance, constant hunger, and fatigue aren't signs of weakness, they're signs of quiet protection instead. Protein first works precisely because it removes the threat your body has been defending against this entire time. It tells your system that energy arrives predictably, that repair is prioritized, and there's no need to hoard anything. This reframes fat loss entirely. Instead of trying to burn fat by force, you make fat release unnecessary to defend. When meals stay calm, blood sugar stays stable, and insulin stays measured, your body no longer needs emergency fat reserves. Fat loss becomes permission-based instead of punishment-based, a completely different relationship between you and your own body. You're not convincing your body through willpower anymore, you're reassuring it through consistent, clear, and repeated physiological signals. This is exactly why this approach feels sustainable long-term, because it works with reflexes your body already naturally has. Over time, your entire baseline shifts. Hunger becomes clearer instead of louder, and fullness starts feeling natural instead of forced. Energy stabilizes, and your identity slowly shifts from someone constantly managing food to someone whose body manages itself instead. Protein first was never about being perfect at every single meal. It was always about setting one simple tone, a tone that quietly says, slow down, distribute energy properly, and prioritize repair before anything else happens. When that tone stays consistent, your physiology follows right along with it, meal after meal, day after day. And that's the moment fat loss stops being the main event and becomes a quiet byproduct of feeling safe. If this changes how you see food, that was always the entire point of explaining all of this clearly. Most people don't need another list of rigid rules. They need to understand the signals they send every day.
protein first is one of those rare signals that costs nothing, removes no foods you enjoy, and works quietly. You don't need to overhaul your entire diet tonight. You can simply start with your very next single meal. Take a few bites of protein first and notice exactly how your body responds over the next few hours. Notice your energy, your hunger, your focus, because that awareness alone is where real, lasting change actually begins. Your body has been listening this entire time, quietly waiting for you to finally understand its language properly.